Hi, I'm Tom Giannotti, attorney with Butler Kahn Law Firm, here with a series of videos called The Rules of the Road That You Need to Know. And today we're starting with the pedestrian edition. So I've got 3 rules that you need to know about pedestrians in Georgia. Starting with rule number 1, always stop and allow pedestrians to cross at crosswalks. So Georgia law says that drivers must stop and remain stopped for pedestrians in a crosswalk. Not just yield, but stop. That means it is illegal for a driver to cut around, squeeze by, or cut off a pedestrian in a crosswalk. It is also illegal for one driver to overtake and pass another driver who is stopped at a crosswalk. Now, what is a crosswalk in Georgia law? Well, there are 2 types of crosswalks that Georgia law recognizes. One is a marked crosswalk, which is what it sounds like, and the other is an unmarked crosswalk. And an unmarked crosswalk is a little hard to define. So I say, again, if you're ever in doubt, always yield to the pedestrians. This could save you a ticket, and it could even save somebody's life. So always yield to pedestrians, whether or not they're in a crosswalk. That brings us to rule number 2. Now, I do want to mention something that I like to call the Frogger exception. So it's not really an exception, and that's why we have these rules up here. But we've probably all seen these folks who will cross a multi-lane highway outside of a crosswalk, even stopping sometimes in between lanes and leaving drivers confused. Is this person going to go? Are they waiting for me? And in those situations, it's always best to yield. Now, again, yielding can mean slowing down and going around and giving the person plenty of room to safely cross. It can mean slowing until they cross. It can mean stopping, right? If the person is not in a crosswalk, you're not necessarily required to come to a complete stop as you would be if the pedestrian is in a crosswalk. And that could be a marked crosswalk or unmarked crosswalk. So I say, if you're able to stop, great. If you see one of these folks playing real life Frogger on the highway, you don't necessarily need to slam on your brakes and cause an accident, but do, if it's practical, possible at all, yield to that person, even if you think they're insane and, again, attempting a real-life game of Frogger. Now, Georgia law does make it illegal for a pedestrian to, quote, suddenly leave a curb or other place of safety and walk or run into the path of a vehicle, which is so close that it is impractical for that driver to stop. So you don't want to be playing what is practical, having this debate after causing an accident. So again, always yield to pedestrians and always stop and allow pedestrians to cross crosswalks. Again, for drivers, this means you still have to yield if it's practical, or you could still be found at fault if, God forbid, you cause an accident. Now, finally, rule number 3. Everything we've been talking about has been applied to drivers. Now we're going to talk about pedestrians. So these rules don't mean that pedestrians can just cross wherever they feel like. Pedestrians must yield the right-of-way to oncoming traffic. That's rule number 3. However, if the pedestrian is already crossing under safe conditions, then the pedestrian has the right-of-way to continue to cross. So if you come across, again, I think we've all seen it. If you come across somebody, you're driving along the road on their way home from work. We know you're in a hurry to get home. But if you see one of these folks that's just walking in the middle of the road and you're approaching that person, they've already begun to cross. And assuming that it was safe for them to begin to make that movement, you got to yield to that pedestrian. Back to rule number 2. But to sum up, in other words, rule number 3, pedestrians need to wait until it is safe enough to cross. If the pedestrian is already crossing the street, drivers must yield to pedestrians. So hopefully this has been informative. I look forward to more rules of the road, and thank you for watching.